The grasslands of Tava were quieter than usual that morning. The sky hung heavy with indecision gray clouds drifting lazily, unsure whether to weep or wander. The wind moved slowly through the tall golden brush, cautious not to disturb whatever lay hidden beneath it. Near the eastern boundary, just beyond a dried-out riverbed, a baby elephant wandered along, small, fragile, and heartbreakingly out of place. He had lost his mother 2 nights earlier. Rangers suspected poachers had moved through the area under the cover of darkness. Though no bullets were found, the absence of the matriarch told its own story. The calf was left dazed, disoriented, and exposed. No herd to protect him, no guide to follow, no rhythm of footsteps to imitate. At barely 6 months old, he had been spotted earlier that morning, following faint scent trails in the dirt. He let out soft, helpless trumpets into the silent air, as if begging the world for an answer. But what came was not what he hoped for. At first, it was just 1 lion, then 3, then the entire pride. 12 lions emerged from the brush like ghosts, their movements silent and precise. They fanned out in formation, flanking both sides of the calf as he backed up against a termite mound. He cried out in panic, his trunk flailing, legs wobbling beneath him. Too young to run, too small to fight. The lions didn't charge, not yet. They were patient. They circled, calculating. The lead lioness crouched low in the grass, golden eyes locked on the trembling calf, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. From a distance, a giraffe raised its head. A warthog froze mid-step. The entire savanna held its breath. And then, the earth moved. Not with thunder, not with panic, but with purpose. From the southern trail came a low rumble, not from the sky, but from beneath the ground. It began as a subtle vibration, then grew undeniable. Trees shivered, dust lifted from the earth, and then, like a curtain pulled back from a forgotten stage, a massive figure emerged from the edge of the clearing. It was a bull, elephant, ancient, enormous, scarred, and alone. He hadn't been seen in this part of the reserve for over a year. Locals called him Muntutha, ghost of the plateau. Once the dominant male of a large herd, Muntu had been cast out years ago in the brutal power struggles of elephant society. Since then, he had wandered the wild in exile, legends spoken of in whispers around campfires. A ghost. But somehow, that day, in that very moment, Muntu had heard the cry. He stepped into the clearing like a mountain rising from the earth. The lions froze. The calf stood still, trunk raised, eyes wide with something that looked almost like hope. Muntu didn't charge, at least, not yet. He simply walked, slow, immense. Each step sent ripples through the silence. His ears flared outward, his head lifted, and then he let out a roar so deep it didn't sound like sound at all. It felt like pressure, a warning from the earth itself. The lead lioness stepped back. Muntu moved faster now, and the pride broke, not all at once. Not in panic, but with deliberate retreat, as though they understood something greater had stepped into their circle. Not just strength, but something older, something sacred, a force they knew not to challenge without consequence. Within moments, the lions vanished into the tall grass. The baby elephant didn't move, but Muntu did. He approached slowly, lowered his head, and gently placed his trunk across the calf's back. The baby leaned into him instantly, like he had finally found the one solid thing left in the world. You stood there, silent and protective. As the sky finally opened up and the rain began to fall across the open land, it wasn't coincidence, it wasn't just instinct, it was something deeper, because that day, an outcast answered a call no one else did. And what followed changed everything. The rain came heavier, now soft but steady, soaking the savanna as if trying to cleanse it of what had nearly happened. Muntu remained unmoved, his massive frame forming a wall between the baby and the dangers of the world. The calf huddled beneath him, his tiny trunk tucked beneath Muntu's chest, blinking up at the giant with quiet wonder. It wasn't just protection, it was recognition. Somewhere in that frightened little heart, the calf knew he had been chosen, claimed, not by blood, but by something stronger. From the ridge above, a ranger named Elijah watched the scene unfold through his binoculars. Hardly believing what he was seeing, he had been monitoring the lion pride from a distance, tracking their unusual movements. When they closed in on the calf, Elijah had reached for his rifle, fully aware it would be too late by the time he arrived. But then, the old bull had appeared. Elijah slowly lowered the binoculars, his chest tightening. Muntu. He remembered the name. Every ranger did. The ghost, the loner, the legend. For years, stories about Muntu drifted through the air like smoke about the bull who wandered alone, but always seemed to appear right before disaster. Some dismissed it as folklore, but not those who had seen him. Elijah had doubted. The bull still lived. And yet, here he was, alive, towering, standing over a motherless calf as if it were his own. Elijah whispered to himself, "I don't believe it." But he did, because there are some moments you don't question. You simply bear witness. Muntu finally turned, nudging the calf gently. The baby hesitated, unsure, unsteady on the wet ground. But Muntu waited. The way only an elephant can. The calf followed step by step, beneath the shelter of his massive frame. They didn't head toward the trees or the safety of the bush. They walked straight into the open, where the land was wide, and the danger still lingered, because Muntu wasn't guiding the calf to hide. He was teaching him to walk. By the time they disappeared beyond the horizon, Elijah had already radioed in the sighting. Headquarters responded with disbelief until he sent drone footage. The video didn't need narration. It didn't need explanation. It simply showed a lone elephant defending the defenseless and walking beside him, until the skies cleared the next morning. Soon, the story spread far beyond Zavo. Wildlife forums buzzed. A few small articles surfaced. Photos of the calf nestled against Muntu's massive leg began circulating online, shared by conservationists who described the moment as something almost sacred. But what none of them saw, what only Elijah had witnessed, was the moment. Just before Muntu left the clearing, the bull had paused. He turned back, and for the briefest second, he locked eyes with the ridge. He had seen the ranger. He had seen the witness, and in that fleeting moment, it hadn't felt like a glance, it felt like a message. Don't interfere, just watch, just remember. In the days that followed, trackers attempted to follow the pair's trail, but they were already gone. Muntu didn't leave paths others could follow. He was a phantom of his own making. But the calf's prints, softer, smaller, full of life, were found near watering holes and beneath shade trees. Always in pairs. Always beside deeper, older footprints. Some said the baby had been adopted. Others called it coincidence. But Elijah knew better. Something rare had happened that day. Not just survival. Not just instinct. Something older, deeper. An elephant who had once been cast out had returned to protect the one thing he never thought he'd have again. And for the calf who had lost everything, that moment became the beginning of something no one saw coming. For days, the two elephants traveled beyond the range of radios and patrols. Muntu avoided the usual migration routes, leading the calf through thick brush, dry riverbeds, and hidden salt licks known only to the oldest bulls. It wasn't just about keeping the calf alive anymore. It was about teaching. With each passing hour, the calf grew steadier on his feet, more curious, more confident, but never far from Muntu. Muntu wasn't just a protector now. He was home. The calf mimicked his every move. When Muntu dusted himself in red clay, the baby clumsily followed. When Muntu raised his trunk to scent the wind, the calf copied him. And at night, when the savanna cooled and stars blinked into view over the acacia trees, the calf pressed tightly to Mantu's side and slept peacefully for the first time since losing his mother. But something else was shifting. For the first time in years, Muntu was being watched not by predators, but by the very herds that had once exiled him. Word of the rescue had spread beyond rangers, beyond human ears. Elephant herds passing through Zavo slowed their pace when they caught his scent. Matriarchs lingered longer at watering holes. Older bulls still cast out but never followed the faint signs of his trail. They had heard what he'd done. In an elephant society, stories are never forgotten. Then came the morning. They were seen again, this time near the southern watering basin. Elijah was the first to arrive, having driven nearly 70 miles after a scout reported a baby and a giant with half a tusk. He climbed a ridge just as sunlight broke over the treetops, and gasped at what lay below. There they were. Muntu stood ankle-deep in the muddy bank, lifting trunkfuls of water high into the air before letting them fall in glittering showers. The calf squealed with joy, splashing wildly and nudging Muntu, leg in play. For a creature who had once wandered in silence, Muntu now made a different kind of noise: low rumbles, deep exhales, and gentle trunk taps on the calf's back. But they weren't alone. Across the basin, another herd had gathered. It wasn't Muntu's old family. They had long since migrated north. This herd was new, curious, hesitant, but fully aware of what stood before them. Elijah watched closely. Their formation was still protective, but not aggressive. The matriarch studied Muntu and the calf carefully, posture neutral but alert. Muntu stared back. He didn't posture. He didn't assert dominance. He simply stood quiet and steady. The calf, sensing the herd, paused mid-play. His ears lifted. His steps slowed. Something deep inside him stirred. Herd recognition runs deep in elephants, even the youngest. He took a few uncertain steps toward the strangers. Muntu moved. He stepped between the calf and the herd, not to stop him, but to wait, and slowly, the herd began to move forward. Elijah held his breath. The matriarch was the first to approach. Her movements were deliberate, her body language calm but cautious. She stopped just a few feet from the calf and extended her trunk. The baby froze. For a moment, then responded with a soft, high-pitched trumpet. The matriarch answered a low, resonant rumble echoing from her chest. Then, something extraordinary happened. The calf walked to her and pressed his head gently against her leg. Muntu didn't stop him. He didn't move. He simply watched. One by one, the other elephants approached, slowly circling the calf, sniffing him, touching him gently with their trunks. The welcome was cautious, but it was real. Elijah had seen herds reject unfamiliar calves before, seeing them turn away, even attack, but not this time. This time, something was different. They didn't just accept the baby. They looked at Muntu and they didn't turn away. Muntu remained still as the herd gathered around the calf. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. The matriarch now stood close enough to touch him. Her trunk still rested softly on the calf's back. The others closed the circle. It wasn't aggression. It was acknowledgement. The ghost of the plateau was no longer alone. He had given the calf something to live for, and in doing so, he had given himself a way back into a world he thought he had lost forever. It wasn't rejection. It was evaluation. They weren't just judging the calf. They were judging him. And Muntu knew that feeling all too well. Years ago, he had belonged to another herd, a powerful one, tightly led by a matriarch who tolerated no uncertainty. Back then, he was younger, proud, strong, but reckless. When a dominance dispute arose among the males, Muntu had challenged too soon, too fiercely. The result wasn't just exile, it was disgrace. The herd turned their backs on him, and he was cast out. Since then, he had walked alone, a name reduced to whispers in ranger notebooks and fading mentions in dust-covered journals. But now, as he stood watching this unfamiliar herd embrace the orphaned calf, a new sensation stirred in his chest, one he hadn't felt in years. But belonging always comes at a cost. The matriarch turned her gaze toward him, not with hostility, but with something unreadable. Muntu lifted his head. His ears flared slightly. The air between them thickened. No movement, no trumpets. Just the heavy weight of memory, pain, and something that felt like forgiveness. Then she stepped forward. Not with dominance, but with purpose. Slowly, she approached him, her trunk brushing the earth with each deliberate step. When they finally stood face to face, her presence was undeniable. Her tusks were smaller than his, her frame leaner, but the power she carried was clear. Muntu didn't lower his gaze, and he didn't challenge her. Instead, he did something no one expected. He rumbled, not a warning, not a call, but was acknowledgement. A low, resonant sound, elephants reserved for mourning and rebirth. The matriarch responded with her own deep rumble, steady, grounded. Then, she extended her trunk and pressed it gently to the scarred side of Muntu's face. The herd's circle widened. They didn't rush to him. They approached with caution, with gentleness, soft exclamations, tentative touches. The elephant's version of reintroductions. An older female nudged the calf toward him. Without hesitation, the baby ran back beneath Muntu's belly, wrapping his small trunk around the bull's front leg, and the herd didn't stop him. They allowed it, and in that moment, Muntu understood. They weren't just taking in the calf. They were offering to take him. Behind the ridge, Elijah lowered his binoculars, eyes misty, and whispered under his breath, "Come on, old man, don't walk away from this." But Muntu didn't walk away. He looked down at the calf clinging to his leg, then looked up at the herd, waiting in a semicircle, their eyes calm, steady, patient. He had survived for years, on instinct, solitude, silence. Trust felt foreign now. Safety felt unnatural. But for the first time since his exile, he was being offered something that couldn't be taken by force. The calf let out a short, insistent trumpet. Muntu looked down at him, and for a long breath no one moved. Then he stepped forward, not toward the open plains, but into the herd. One step, then another. The matriarch didn't move aside. She walked beside him, and the others followed. The calf remained close at his flank. Elijah watched from the ridge as they disappeared together into the golden brush, not as a rogue bull and a lost orphan, but as something else entirely. But just as the dust settled behind them, Elijah's radio crackled again, a new transmission from the Northern Patrol. Lions, too close to the herds, aggressive, starving. The peace Muntu had just found might not last long. The morning air was already thick with tension before the sun rose over the horizon. The herd moved uneasily, their trunks swept low across the ground, picking up scents that didn't belong. Eyes darted, ears stiffened. The calves stayed close to their mothers, walking in tight formations. The matriarch paused to listen. Muntu stood beside the young orphan, his body weathered from weeks of travel. But something had changed. He was no longer an outsider. He was a sentinel. Elijah's voice returned through the radio. The lions had been tracked heading south. 3 males had split off from the pride, likely starving, known to trail migrating herds from a distance, always waiting for a weak link, a straggler. A calf separated in the chaos. The herd was approaching a narrow pass, rock-lined on both sides, with thick brush along the ridge. Muntu sensed it before anyone else. Just as the matriarch signaled the herd to proceed, he froze, his ears lifted, his trunk raised, nostrils flaring. Then he turned sharply toward the left ridge and rumbled a deep, echoing warning. The herd stopped. The matriarch responded with a low trumpet, confused. But Muntu didn't explain. He moved forward, planting himself between the brush and the herd's path, head low, shoulders squared. A rustle broke the silence, then another, and suddenly a lion appeared, not charging, not roaring, just crouching, eyes locked on the small orphan that had drifted near the rear. It had waited for this moment, but it hadn't counted on Muntu. The bull charged, no warning, no hesitation. His feet thundered like drums against the earth. The lion, startled by the sheer speed and force, darted back toward the rocks, but not fast enough. Montu struck. The impact wasn't direct, but it was enough. The lion tumbled into the underbrush and vanished. Seconds later, a second lion emerged, this one flanking the opposite side of the pass, aiming to circle the herd. The mothers reacted instantly, shielding their calves, trumpeting in panic. The matriarch swung her head wide, but once again, it was Muntu who reached the threat first. He charged Loa, faster. His trumpet ripped through the air, echoing across the basin. The lion froze, skidded, snarled halfway, then turned and fled. The third lion never showed itself. It had seen enough. The herd stood still, breath heaving, legs trembling. The calves tucked tightly against their mothers, and at the edge of the clearing, Muntu stood tall, scarred, weathered, but unwavering. He was no longer the ghost of the plateau. He was its guardian. But when the dust finally settled and silence returned, the herd began to move again slowly, steadily through the pass and into the open safety of the grasslands beyond. Muntu didn't follow right away. He stood alone at the edge of the pass, facing the hills where the lions had vanished. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His body tense but unshaken. Because he hadn't just defended a calf, he had defended a place in the world that, for so long, had cast him out, and now, at last, he had reclaimed it. The matriarch circled back, leading the calf toward him. She paused beside Muntu and gently extended her trunk, brushing the side of his jaw. There was no ceremony, no sound, no grand display, just understanding. When Muntu finally turned to rejoin the herd, the calf stayed, at his side, eyes wide, steps light. The danger had passed. For now, but something had changed. Deep within the savannah, something had shifted. The story of the old bull, who once walked alone, now traveled faster than any lion could run. Rangers told it over firelight. Locals spoke of him, not as a loner, but as a protector, not just of one orphaned calf, but of something greater. A code, a truth that runs deeper than survival. That strength is not just size or power, it is presence, it is standing your ground. Especially after the world has turned its back on you. Months passed, seasons changed, and Muntu remained with the herd. He never challenged the dominant bulls. He didn't need to. His role was already written. He was the guardian, the one who kept watch when calves wandered too far, the one who stood firm where no predator dared approach again. As for the young orphan, he grew quickly, stronger by the day, playful, bold, but never far from Muntu's side. Their bond was more than instinct, it was inheritance. Something unspoken passed from one heart to another. And though no one knew where Muntu would go when his time finally came, one thing was certain, because sometimes, the fiercest stories in the wild aren't about fear or power. They're about love that chooses to return when it's needed most. And in the golden silence of the savannah, under skies that had once watched him wander alone, MUNT, you walked with his herd.